You're listening to Neurodivergent Mates. Hello and welcome to another episode of Neurodivergent Mates. I'm your host, Will Wheeler. And I'd like to say I'm joined with my co-host, Fodon John, but he's actually not here today. He's away sick, so my heart is going out to Fodon John. But I've actually got an awesome guest joining me today. I'd like to say all the way from Ireland, but you're actually just all the way from Melbourne. Sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Aisling Smith Vance?
Yes. Will I go by Ash in Australia because, Aussies like to shorten it down and I like, to make it easy for people, but it's Aisling. So essentially there's an invisible H. Yeah, it's one of those lovely Irish names that doesn't look like how it sounds.
Yeah, totally. And you do know what, right? When I was over I've got a fair few Irish friends and all of that. And when I'd see their names, being dyslexic, that was like torture. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think say like Siobhan, right? And I think it's spelled S-O-B or so. I can't remember. It was just so like, oh my God, I feel like an idiot because I don't know how to pronounce this correctly. But I'm sure that's a whole nother podcast we could speak about. But yeah, Ash, thank you so.
Those names are all from they're all from the Gaelic language, you see. So they're in a different language. They are words from a different language. So don't feel bad that you can't get them because it's not actually English.
Well, do you know what, right? What blew my mind when I was in Ireland? I never realized that like Ireland has its own language. And I didn't know that until I went there. And then I was like seeing signs that are written differently. And then I think I was on the train from Dublin going back to Galway or something, and they'll be like Shimbrick. I don't know. It just sounded all like gibberish to me, and I'm like, what the hell, man? You know what I mean? I never realized there was another language, but interesting place.
Yes, it's fun. So you can say I'm all the way from Ireland via Melbourne.
All the way from Ireland via Melbourne. I like that. So, look, thank you so much for coming on. I better sort of share with the audience what we're covering today. So today what we're going to be covering is late diagnosis mother of a child with AuDHD. But before we do get into that, I might just do a bit of a shout out to any listeners out there. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe, like, and follow to all of our social media platforms. We're available on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn. Also, too, if you're listening to this via a podcast, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you find or listen to your podcast. Also, too, please rate the show if you haven't already done so. It really helps with the algorithms and helps us get out there so other people can check us out. Also, too, if you haven't already done so, please check out all the cool work we're doing at Neurodiversity Academy. You can check that out at neurodiversityacademy.com. Also, too, just a bit of a warning, some discussions may be triggering. If you need help, please reach out to a loved one or call emergency services. We are not doctors. This is a space for sharing experiences and strategies. Also, too, while we're going through the live part of the podcast here, if you've got any questions, please feel free to shoot them through. And, if they're a good question, we might put them up on the screen here. What do you reckon, Ash?
I think that's a good idea. Let's get the audience involved. Well,
yeah, why not? Nice. But before we do, we might say a big shout out to Tia, two of my favorite people on the podcast. All right, Tia, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to hear from you. You ready to rock and roll?
Always. Born ready, Will.
Born ready. You took the word straight out of my mouth. I love it. So you know what? Like, I obviously know a lot about you. So for people who don't know, Ash and I actually work together. It was sort of funny because you sort of reached out to me just before we started working together, and then all of a sudden we were working together. So it was like it just worked so easily.
I know. Yeah, it's been wild. That's when actually Tia, the wonderful Tia, and I were putting together a panel for the UN discussion on autism. And I was like, I know a guy with a great podcast, and he would know loads, because we were looking for a diverse representation of autism in Australia and across, Oceania. And I just thought of you immediately. So we connected through that, and now we are colleagues. So I feel very blessed.
See, but we're only just talking about the importance of having a podcast, right? So we connected through the podcast. There you go, perfect example. But you know what? Let us know a little bit about yourself. You've got such an interesting life. We'd love to hear about it.
This is such a funny question for an autistic ADHDer, right? So when I run trainings in organizations, I would say, like, when you're recruiting someone, use the question. So, tell me about yourself. I would say to them, well, how long have you got? I could be here all day. So what part of my life would you like to know? Basically, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, because we do only have the hour. I obviously Irish. I've been in Australia for 15 years. I came here via China. So I lived in Shanghai in China in 2010, working at the World Expo in Shanghai. And prior to that, I lived, obviously in Ireland and New York for a little while prior to that too. So a bit of a global traveler, not really kind of essentially settling anywhere until I fell in love in Shanghai and moved here with my Australian boyfriend at the time, now husband, and father of my wonderful, delightful, gorgeous, neurodivergent son. So that's I suppose that's a bit of an insight into it. And then the rest is just work. Like, where would I begin with that? Being an autistic ADHDer as a late diagnosed one, particularly, I think a lot of people who are listening to this who are late diagnosed or don't yet know that they are neurodivergent. It like in my career, I kind of hopscotched around a lot of things.
So you were job hopping?
I was, yeah, and it wasn't just that like I was intentionally doing so, because I'm very ambitious, very driven, very passionate. So when I find something that I like, somebody invests in me to come and work for them, I'm in, and I'm giving you everything until some of my quirkiness or some of my traits or something generally, and I would reflect now to see that they were neurodivergent traits, might blow up in my face. So some of the wonderful elements of my story were, I guess, I started off studying physiotherapy in university, and I failed anatomy 5 times. And I find that really funny, because the exam that I failed, the same one, it was a multiple choice exam, and it was about the extremities and, where is this muscle attached, and what, vein or artery or nerve ending is, attached. It was like, I had a method and I studied, but I just couldn't remember. I don't, unfortunately, have a photographic memory, but I just wasn't able to put those pieces together. So I left university and I started working in sales, and I loved it because I'm a people person, and I think my ADHD takes over, and I get so passionate about what I'm doing and the products that I'm selling.
Can I just say on that, right? So I think when you hear a lot of people, especially with autistic people, they're like, oh no, they could never be in sales or something like that. And I think that's a perfect example with what you've just spoken about, because I meet so many, I suppose, autistic people who are ADHD as well, very common. And man, they're unreal when it comes to the sales type of thing. Well, why do you reckon that might be? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I think the two work together because obviously I've done a lot of reflection. And I think like with ADHD, you can be very passionate and you're really engaging and you can get like super hyper focused about things and doing things. But also, I would see, and of course, all autistic people are different and how we experience and do things are different. But it's that sense of righteousness and doing things right and doing a good job, and very much kind of focusing on the facts and the figures and the specifics. So I think that they work really well together, and that you can be you can be highly effective in many different careers. Like quite often.
Well, I was going to say it would be like, say a dodgy salesperson, right, is going to, probably sell you the world, but like, they're not doing it for the right reasons. But I'm assuming with maybe an autistic person, that's just not what they could potentially do because it's not right, correct?
No, because you can't. And I think like that was a big factor for me, maybe in job hopping or losing my jobs throughout the years. I was not able to lie, unable to lie, and I would always say that. Oh my God, I can't lie. I just like not. But I can see it's that that's the element of autism within me that makes me unable to do that and to do a good job. So. And to provide a good service, because if I'm selling you something, like I'm believing in what I'm telling you I'm going to do, if we don't deliver on that, like I'm heartbroken, but I'm going to probably have a go at who didn't deliver it the way that it was supposed to be, or the way that I sold it, or whatever it might be. Now, quite often I oversold, and that might have been my problem too. But that I believed too much in what we could do, and but and again, that's the importance of being in a good team where you can
work off each other,
rely, and you work off each other, and you ensure. And it's about having impeccable standards. I think that's really important in providing people with value. Providing good value and is really something that I've always wanted to do. So I've hopscotched, Will, and then I moved to I've worked in hospitality a lot, like and moving to Australia.
How is that for you? Because hospitality would have been very. Like, were you working in busy pubs or anything like that? Was it?
Yeah.
So how is that for sensory overload then?
Yeah, well, it's, funny, again, a bit of reflection. I think, my ADHD definitely, I think like it was the next day that I would have crashed, and tiredness and like all of the things. But at the time, it was always, and I think I've been very good about like honing in what I hear and being on purpose and working on purpose. So why am I here? And what's the reason? Like, what am I doing? I'm here to serve, drink to customers. I'm here to look after the customers, make sure that they're taken care of, and to make money for the company that I'm working for. So, I guess I did pretty well. I worked in a bar in New York, in Dublin during the recession. I had my own business, started my own business at 20 in juice and smoothie bars. And then the GFC. So I was creating a juice and smoothie bar franchise.
So it was about 2009, correct?
2008, yeah.
2008,
and then,
yeah. That would have been the beginning of the GFC, correct?
Yeah. Well, it was 2008 that I lost my business. So because nobody was buying smoothies and juices at that point, but that was okay. I was still young. I went back to college and I studied event management. Because I found that I really enjoyed events. I was very good at running them. I was very litigious and making sure, that they were run. And I was great under pressure, because it's that, fight or flight where, an ADHDer just like kicks into action and gets things done, and thrives. And I think that was the same working in hospitality. You thrive on the buzz, and then you crash afterwards. So
what was it like growing? What was it like growing up for you then? Like, as a kid, was it similar type of stuff and you look at it now and go, man, now I can see why I was like that, or why I felt like that.
Yes, I do now. Hindsight is, is what I have, and it really helps. I grew up in Ireland, in rural Ireland, on on a farm in the middle of the country. So very remote, very, to hardworking parents. Like my dad is turning 80 this year, and he still works 3 days a week. Like
Wow.
he'll never retire. He loves it. My mum, like very hardworking. I remember a story. She worked for a company for 10 years. She never had a sick day,
Oh
not
my
one sick
God.
day in 10 years.
Wow.
And she, during that time, she broke her arm, and she left work for 2 hours to go to the hospital to get a plaster cast on her arm, and she came back to work after
What
she got
type
the
of work
plaster
was it?
on her arm. She was working in accounts for bookkeeping for a
Oh,
bakery.
okay. It'd be worse if
Yeah.
you're like working in a warehouse and you really
Oh
need to
yeah,
lift
no.
boxes and that. But still, that's like, because like what happens when
Mm,
you break your arm, or your body goes into like,
yeah.
you get a lot of adrenaline and you feel stuff. So that's a credit to your mother. But you
Mm.
know what?
But
It
that's
sounds,
the
yeah.
type of mentality that I grew up around, that it was,
Mm,
just working and you work, and so
mm,
you're obviously always very influenced by your surroundings, by the people around you. And I have four brothers, no sisters, four brothers. I've got three older brothers and one younger brother.
mm,
And now I look back, I think I was always like, I never really knew who I was. So I've always been masking. I was
mm.
always wanted to be popular. I was very into sports. So I found that like I enjoyed that, but that was a great
What are you
way
talking
to
about,
release,
Ash? You are
you know.
popular. What are you talking
Yeah, well,
about?
I've always tried. I've always tried to be Will, and I wanted to fit in so bad. So, like,
Mm.
I constantly found myself masking, obviously, just to emulate, like, and replicate, like, what the cool kids are doing or who they were, but missing the social
Did
cues.
you find you
Like,
attracted the wrong people because of that?
yes,
Like maybe like you were trying to be this person you weren't, so maybe you were attracting the wrong
mm.
friends, maybe the wrong partners eventually, things like that.
Yeah, well, I could definitely say that my dating years were interesting, to say the least. But it's that kind of, and also getting yourself into situations that
Mm,
that you find yourself in, and you're like, you know, not knowing like to say no, or just feeling like awkward, or not knowing what to
mm,
do, and you're just like, oh well, if and I sometimes kind of reflect, and what you do as a late diagnosed adult, and it's kind of like, what if I knew? How would some of the situations that I found myself in throughout my life be different? Like
mm,
how would, and I won't get into it today, but like I know, like there were so many things where, like, work situations, but also like social interactions, like where I would have had great friends who are no longer my friends, because I would have said things, because you say things. Again, I speak about the
impulsive type of
honesty,
stuff. Yeah.
impulsivity, saying exactly what you think, not knowing that people don't really say exactly what they think, and it's not
Mm,
always, it's not, honesty is not always a virtue in a lot of
mm,
situations.
totally.
And when you are, then people can get offended, or they don't want to be your friend anymore because that's what you're like. But and it can be difficult. Like, there's a lot of guilt. Like, obviously, I've been living here in Australia for 15 years, so I have a lot of friends at home that I went to school and college with, and that I grew up with, that like I don't continue, like, communication with them. I do, like, when I go home to Ireland, I'll get in touch. We'll have a night out. We'll, get in touch from time to time. But like, I actually find myself like in that stuck, like,
Mm,
I feel like I can't or shouldn't reach out to them all the time, because I don't, or haven't been doing it.
mm,
And
mm.
then, like, because I have other friends who are always in touch with their friends from home, and I think, oh, you're so lucky.
Why
But
aren't I like
now,
that type of thing?
yeah,
Yeah,
and
I get
these
what
are
you
some
mean.
of the things that you can kick yourself over,
Mm,
when you're when you think that you're neurotypical and you don't know any different. but I think one of the beautiful things about receiving a diagnosis was to be able to go easy on myself and to stop kicking myself for the things that I don't do or that I haven't done, or, you know, that I find difficult. Because, you know, I mentioned, like, I've had a lot of instances where I've run my own business throughout the years, because sometimes it just got too difficult, or I had a like harrowing situation in the workplace, and I said, no, that's it. I'm never going to rely on somebody else to employ me ever again. I need to be self-sufficient. I need to look after myself, because I knew I was driven. I knew I could do it. If I was doing it for the companies, like I was making multi-million dollars for some of the companies I was working with here in Australia, like closing deals, like, you know, writing tenders, like, and I loved it. I was thriving on it. But then, you know, I would be let go. No commission, no thank you, no just, you know, and I'm like, wow, okay. You know, this is interesting. So, you know, so I've always kind of felt the need to have to do it myself, which has, you know, I suppose led me to this. So yeah, so my son, beautiful Daniel.
Hang on. You're doing really well. Let's just take a bit of a breather, have a bit of a sip here for a sec. What we might do, just so the viewers and the listeners can have an understanding of what we're going through. So yeah, no. What I actually wanted to cover now was, you know, you've just spoken a little bit about your diagnosis. Well, you sort of touched a little bit, but you haven't gone really in depth as into when. But obviously, your son is AuDHD, correct? And
Correct.
I'm assuming when your son was diagnosed, that was when you were diagnosed as well. Is that correct?
Well, that kind of it just, everything made sense then, Will. He was 2.5. He's turning 8 on Monday, next Monday.
Oh, nice.
On the 29th. So he was 2.5. He was in childcare, because I was a working mom. I had a full-time job, and he was in childcare from he was 1. And he had he was such a beautiful, he still is always a beautiful child, but he had a real way with some of the workers, and they adored him. And he broke his leg, and he slowed down for the first time because he couldn't be running around like he was, you know, a crazy toddler. And one of the workers said, she pulled me and my husband aside and just said, look, I don't know how you're going to take this, but it's my due diligence to share with you that I think that Daniel might be autistic. And I'd be doing you a disservice by not telling you. And because now you can get early intervention, or you can begin to look into it. And, you know, if you don't want to do that, but I am so grateful for her, because we were like, okay, great, you know, let's look into it. Like, what will we do? So we were very positive, because I know a lot of parents can go the other way, and they're like, no way, no, not our son. He's too young. He'll grow out of it, whatever. We were like, okay, let's go. What can we do? So we took it, like head on, and we got into the NDIS. We went to a pediatrician. We got him in with an OT, a speechy, and a psychologist. We've like done so many therapies. Of course, you know, the NDIS is amazing in Australia. Like, it's so fantastic, you know, and he's had this opportunity to have all these years of therapy and support, and you know, everything. Like I say, if we were living in Ireland, we probably still wouldn't even know. Well, I reckon we probably still wouldn't even know, because it's not like, you know.
So it's such a different system over there, I'm assuming.
It's different, yeah, and there is no like funding support like there is here. So I'm so grateful to the Australian system, to the early intervention, and you know, he's doing so great, and he's so inspiring. Awesome. But we went to the Australian, because, like, you know, everybody who's listening here, everyone who's been on this podcast knows that the waiting lists for diagnosis are so long and so difficult. And he was my friend is a lecturer in the Australian Catholic University, and she said to me, Ash, they do diagnosis in the university, so maybe put them on that list too. So they were the first one that came up, and it was just after lockdown. So we had gone through lockdown with getting all the therapy and everything, but it's for the official diagnosis,
Yeah.
And he was about 5 at the time. And, during the time, because I like hyper focus onto things, I started studying everything about autism. At that time, we didn't know he had ADHD. So I was just like up to my neck in books about autism, like doing courses, learning.
And were you starting to go, hang on, I think this might be me as well?
Well, doing everything. You see, I didn't mention it before, but when I was in my early 20s here in Australia, I had the opportunity to participate in the television show The Apprentice. So I flew back to Ireland to be a contestant on The Apprentice, and then I was fired and I came back to Australia. But I experienced for the first time in my life at that time deep depression.
Wow.
So it was like
from
falling
the
into
show.
that pit. From the show, yeah.
Really? Because it was everyone would have seen it.
Everyone gets fired. Yeah. Well, you're on like TV, everybody, and I was just so embarrassed.
Did anyone recognize you? Did anyone go, "Hey, you're that person from the show"?
Yeah, I wasn't on it for long enough to. Sometimes people do. I had a choice line that I used. I don't know how we feel about cursing on the podcast, but I had a choice line.
What
do I?
Say?
So I said fuck 5 times throughout the show, right? So it was like, so I very easily do curse. But my last line, and you're going to laugh at this as an ADHDer, was I should have read the fucking brief. And then I would get a lot of people who would say that to me, oh, you should have read the fucking brief. And that was like kind of close the show. But I didn't like the brief the brief for the tab. I was like, that's so typical ADHD. If I knew, or if I was able to manage myself, I'd have delegated that job to IC or to somebody else to say, okay, I want you to go through this document. I want you to pull out all the important things. But I was like that people pleaser. I was like, no, I'll do all the things. And I put my hand up and I'll do everything. And because that's always been, so I think, with age and understanding and the importance of diagnosis and understanding your limitations and understanding your strengths is that you can delegate the work that you are not amazing at doing, or you can focus on, that's not my key area of strength. While I want to do it, I'd love to, I'd prefer to focus on this if possible. So you're not letting other people down or yourself and causing yourself all of this anxiety. But anyway, so I came back to Australia. I was depressed and, I had rejection sensitive dysphoria in a bad way, in a really bad way, because I was fired on national television in Ireland. And I started personal development then. So I started to go to seminars. I started to take courses. I started to do everything I could to feed myself with positivity and to learn. So I became a coach, or I did some coaching courses. I did courses to become a public speaker or a professional speaker. I did other content creation courses. And this is back in the day before people were creating content essentially, but it was about building a business based around, content and experience and things like that. And I kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do with it, but I was inspired to help young people. So I started up I've always loved empowerment. Empowerment is my buzzword. So I started the Young Empowerment Program, where I supported young people just to let go of what might be holding them back. Cool. And I reflected on that because my brilliant mentor, Ben Harvey, he's a Sydney man from Authentic Education. So I studied a lot with those guys. He said your ideal client is the person that you were 10 years ago. Who is that? And for me, it was a teenager who was struggling in many ways, right? And I was like, how can I support somebody now that I've all this personal development knowledge and stuff that I wasn't brought up with, that I didn't know. And there's a lot of people who don't know this stuff, and maybe I can support them. So that was kind of the beginning of my journey to empowerment, I would say, and supporting other people to be empowered. So I transferred that over to Daniel and just thought, okay, how can I empower him? What can I do? I studied NLP, and then, of course, like a good ADHDer, I bought all the courses and I became an ADHD with my hyper focus, my hobby. I became a trainer of NLP, a trainer of hypnosis and timeline therapy, which was amazing for me and for him, because I was able to utilize everything that I learned to help him. When we got the diagnosis, I said to the psychiatrist, she was a clinical psychiatrist or psychologist, and I just look at everything that you're telling me is me. Like that's me. So I think that maybe we should do a diagnostic for me. Would that be something that we could do? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. That would actually be wonderful to see, the comparison, totally. Like with a son and mother.
Where is it coming from type of thing? Yeah, interesting.
Because I was like, so this is like genetic, like obviously, because she was like with the ADHD. That's when he was diagnosed with ADHD and autism. And I was like, right. So then I got my diagnosis from them, and they were like, yeah, like you've got ADHD. But we also did an autism test, and you've tested. I always say this, like, you've tested positive for autism as well. and I was like, but that floored me. And I was floored for about 6 months, not knowing, like just reading over it and over it, like, what, like, really? Trying to get my head around it.
Would you say that was a shock to the system, or was it, say, depression, or I don't know, because like now it's probably making a lot of things make sense, if that makes sense.
Yes. Well, it did, because what I had researched before was a lot of autism in children and so on. So then, of course, I got on the autism in adults bandwagon and looking at autism in women, and did a lot of that.
What I might say, because we're actually going through this pretty well. What was that like? So you obviously got your pre-diagnosis. Oh, well, you're diagnosed now, so it's obviously what was it like after that? Like, what changed now?
Well, I suppose,
and I'm assuming as well, probably,
I say the first 6 months were
bringing
difficult.
Your son up would have changed maybe a little bit.
I'm so grateful for the support that I received from his therapists, because they helped me with him no end. And just like I would say to anybody who's on that journey, get an amazing hour OT. She changed my life, because he is such a great kid, but there were parts of the journey that were difficult. Of course, I can't say everything was roses. Like there were definitely parts that were challenging, but she provided me with strategies. We were able to support him in so many ways. And it meant so much to be able to do that. But obviously it was very time consuming. One of the other things I was talking about having businesses and being an entrepreneur. I was always so driven and passionate to do that. But some of the areas where life is difficult is financially and in I was going to say keeping within the law. I don't mean it. That sounds terrible. But I haven't done my tax in 4 years. Like I have to do it, like that's, you have to get that done. I have some speeding and parking fines that I need to get paid.
Oh, you rebel.
It's like,
let's go.
Well, it's not. It's that ADHD thing where you're like, oh, I'll just put that into the drawer, into my pit of shame, into my drawer of shame, and I'll just leave that there with all the other shame that I have in my life. And you try to I've been really good throughout my life, I think, compartmentalizing stuff and just putting it to where I don't want it to be. Now, I'm not saying this, I'm not proud of it. I'm really not proud of this at all, but I can identify that these are some of the things. So if we're talking about pre-diagnosis, there'd be so many things. And I'm like, why can I not do that? Like, what's wrong? Like, why am I not,
Sorry, can I ask? There better not be a warrant out for your arrest.
No, there's certainly not.
Let's hope
No, I
let's
hope
hope the
not.
speeding fines and that. Hopefully, this doesn't attract the police to you. So hopefully that doesn't. Yeah,
Touch wood,
wood.
Will.
Totally.
But I always, because I share, because like now I suppose the journey that I've gone on now, I work with people who are neurodivergent, and that is so fulfilling to me. And I think one of the things, because I'm a good storyteller, I think that's my Irishness, Will, and one of the key things is that I'm very honest and I share from the heart. While a lot of people would be too embarrassed to share some of the things that I've shared, I'm like, well, if it can help you or like to understand, a lot of my clients will say to me like, oh my God, Ash, like, I just thought that I was the only one who did things like that.
Do
Like,
you
or,
know what? Sorry to cut you off
yeah.
there, but that's such an interesting point, because there's often times where I speak to other neurodivergent people about how I'm feeling or certain things that I've done in life or whatever like that. And, I sometimes think, oh man, that's a bit oversharing. But it feels like they get it and they're like, oh, yeah. No judgment here, man. I totally get it. You know what I mean?
Well, we do overshare, because there's that part of who we are. But the thing is, because neurotypical people don't. So they look at us and like we're used to, engaging with neurotypical people who we've overshared to, and they're looking at us like they're like,
holy shit,
God,
man, this
like, you're a
person's
bit
like,
strange.
yeah, totally.
So therefore, like, if we catch ourselves and we find ourselves like in that like moment of like, oh my God, I've gone too far, traditionally, if we were with a neurotypical person, they'd have said, no, that's too much. What we,
but I will say, right, sometimes like there's been times where I've like been with people, I'm like, you know what, I think this person's neurodivergent. So I've overshared something, and then their response has been like exactly how a neurodivergent person would respond. And I've been like, yeah, this person's neurodivergent for sure. You know what I mean? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I've found in the past.
No. I guess we kind of like have a spidey sense for that, don't we?
maybe.
We can, yeah.
We can, we're like, sometimes like I find like, this might sound funny as well. It's like I've got like a radar for neurodivergent people. I can spot them a mile away. I'm like, I bet you that person's this, and a lot of the time they probably won't even realize or know that they're neurodivergent. I'm like, I bet you that person's this. They've done this, they've done that, they've done this. And then 9 times out of 10, that person will come to me and they'll be like, hey, yeah, by the way, I'm actually this and that and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, told yous, you know what I mean? But actually, moving on from that, how did life change for you and your son post-diagnosis? So you've sort of spoken a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
But what about for your son? How was that for him? Did a lot of his stuff change, or was, I don't know, were you able to maybe support him better? I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, like, he's still young, and like he was young at the time, and I think like I had to come to terms with it, like myself, and I had to decide like where I was going. At the time, I was running an NLP training school called the Institute of Empowered Psychology, and I felt I had to step away from that. One of the funny things about NLP, one of the things that we do in NLP is eye pattern, and we watch people's eye patterns. And it was one of the things that I found so much difficulty in training or doing as part of, it was watching. And like, I just never knew why. I was like, I just can't, I find it's really, really hard. Now it all makes sense, right? Like in that, because I have been masking so heavily for my whole life, just like, being able to, because I was a salesperson from a very early age, I was trained how to behave, how to mirror and mimic other people, like, and how to. So I was trained how to mask.
You would have been so burnt out.
make eye contact, and then but like not intensely, like, but in a really soft way that you can engage with people, like all of that kind of stuff, which is really 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 funny. So I've always been like, feeding myself with as much like personal development and growth information as possible, but also because, well, I found a deficit. Like I was like, why, what is, like I was looking for like the answer to why do I do things. It's like, well, what is missing? Because I'm doing all of this work on myself, but there's something that I'm just not getting, I like communication training courses, like so many things. I even created, and I was running a communication training course in my old business that I used to, and there was not one part of that was about neurodivergent training or communication at all, because it wasn't also really in my radar, even though Daniel was neurodivergent. I think like I just didn't think about adults in that way until I got my diagnosis, and then everything changed. My whole model of the world was turned upside down, and I saw everything. So I like, there's that like bittersweet. I was so grateful for my diagnosis because that was what I was looking for. All of the courses, everything that I had done was kind of leading me to that point where I discovered, it was like my eureka moment. And
Can
yeah.
I just say on that, right? Like for me now, especially being diagnosed, it helps me to be able to choose maybe the people I want to be friends with. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that I might meet someone they're an awesome person, but sometimes I'm just finding I'm clicking so much better with neurodivergent people a lot of the time. I don't know. Since my diagnosis, it's just made it easier for me to be able to make those decisions.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very good point. I love people. Well, like I love, but I've always like really enjoyed, but like, it's funny, like,
Can I
I've gone
say
to networking.
I
Yeah.
like people too, but I like my own, like especially with networking. We're actually speaking about this in an episode of a while ago, that when I started networking when I was a lot younger, I thought networking is you go in there and you just have to make friends or connections or whatever. And I found quite early that, some of the people I was trying to connect with just weren't me. Do you know what I mean? They weren't my crew type of thing. But once I started connecting with the right people, building that brand, which I've got now, the people I'm connecting with, it's like, whew, I feel so much better. You know what I mean?
I do, Will, but I also, I love what you just said. They're building that brand. It was like you had to discover who you were first. Like, and I think that sometimes, I know I was searching for who I was for a long time because didn't have that piece of the puzzle. So I used to actually joke and say I'm like a chameleon. Like I'll be anyone you want me to be because I'm really good at doing that, so I can just like, morph into whatever and I'll fit into any situation. And I was very adaptable in so many different types of situations and work and jobs and organizations, which is interesting. But like, I suppose like, going back into the post-diagnosis, I focused on, because I was running a training company in, for NLP, I was like, how can I transfer everything that I know from this to actually supporting neurodivergent people? Because I used to be a coach and I used to coach high performance women in business, and high performance women. I had like Hollywood actresses. I had like, lots of like sports stars, athletes, like Olympians, and C-level executives were the level that I
Here in
was coaching.
Australia.
Here in Australia, but also around the world. Yeah.
Yeah,
So like
interesting.
on online coaching, right? Because because that was my focus, my niche. And I kind of pulled myself away and said, like, I don't feel like I can do that now because I feel unauthentic because I'm autistic. Now that I've had this, so how am I going to reinvent myself to support? And actually, one of my former clients got her diagnosis in ADHD, and she said to me, Aisling, I think that you should be an ADHD coach. I think that you'd really help people. And because she's like, a lot of how you help me and the strategies you gave me when we worked together, they're really relevant and they help me now. So I just thought, okay, but I have to do more study because I didn't have enough self-belief that I had enough. So I did a diploma in mental health, and I did a coaching course in ADHD coaching, to be an ADHD coach, and just kind of more research about like adults and ADHD and neurodiversity, and like how can I,
it's
because I have
important.
to help myself first, right? So it's that kind of a way, like going back to my old mentor Ben, you want to help yourself. You want to be the coach to help who you were 10 years ago. So, I always kind of held that in my head and thought, okay, well, it's not 10 years ago, but what about, people now? Because I've got 10, 15 years of personal development experience, and not everyone has that. And there are people who are being late diagnosed now, and they haven't had any personal development. And I think it's probably what kept me sane on an even keel almost. Will like to have done so much personal development, and the Tony Robbins and like all of the different gurus. Like,
can I say, I think the thing that helped me, especially after my diagnosis, was, and we're talking about the brand and all that before, for a long time I had built this neurodivergent dyslexic person. So I was connected with a lot of key people, like world-leading doctors and that within this field. Then I got the diagnosis for ADHD, and was like, I just fell right into it because I had everyone around me. I'd been spending so much time soaking up this information, and it was almost like, yes, when I got my diagnosis type of thing. That was just me anyway. But everyone's story is different.
They are, aren't they? Like, it's interesting. And I love, like 3 of my brothers are dyslexic, now, I sit like, I don't think my brothers are extremely happy with me diagnosing them, but in the same way that I'm just like, wait, like this is genetic. Like I have it, my son has it. My son, my brother, his son also is autistic. And then I look at my brother, and I joke when I do trainings, because one of the things about being autistic is either you talk too much or you talk too little, right? And I say, well, like, this is me and my little brother. I talk a lot, he talks very little. They say that when we were growing up that I took all the words and left him with none. But it's like they're two very, he's also dyslexic. And I think like we're very 2 different styles of neurodiversity within the family that
Same
we
with
grew
my
up
brother.
4 years apart, right? Like, and it's like we're different. We've got similarities. We think differently. And he was like, so since when have I been autistic? And I'm like, oh, sorry. I was like, I guess forever, love. But it's just it's like, it's not my place to diagnose you. But
totally.
I feel like that's the feeling that I'm getting, because I can look at our family and I can see, well, this brother has ADHD and dyslexia, just like you will, and
so it's changed a lot.
Different.
Yeah, totally.
Because you have a different perspective then, don't you?
Yeah, totally. And I think that, and even thinking about my brother, like him and I, we are completely different when it comes to our neurotypes and all of that. But moving on from that, being like, similar to your son and sort of learning about all this stuff as well, are there any cool, unique dynamics in your mother-son relationship, given that you're both AuDHD?
Yes. Well, he's really, when I started talking to him about autism, because a lot of parents do struggle. Like, when do I tell when do I tell my son or my daughter that they're autistic, and how do I go about it? And, it was after when I took ownership of mine, when I started to live it, and I started my coaching business, and I started to talk about it. I'm a professional speaker. I talk on stage. I talk about neurodiversity. I'm here in the house, and I'm like in front of like my camera, and I'm running a presentation, and he's here beside me, and he's like, "Mommy, what is this autism? Like, what is autistic? And like, what's ADHD? You know, so that I'm like, okay, you're ready. Okay, let me tell you what it is. So you and me, we are autistic and we have ADHD. Like, that's the way that I say it. I know people say it differently. You know, I always
think
say to
whatever
them, like,
works
I don't carry
best.
it around in my bag, but like, you know, it's like, let me tell you, let me explain to you what that means. So it's like, just means that our brains are wired differently, and it's not just you, but it's you and me. So, you know, it's like, we're going to think differently to our friends, to our family, to other people. Like, you're probably going to think things differently to me, and I'm going to think things differently to you. We're going to behave differently. And I was like, you know, the way you find it really hard to like sit down in class, and you have to sit on the spiky cushion, and you know, you need to play with the poppers and things like that. It's like, that's how your ADHD is manifesting. Like, these, my poor child, I use words like this, like manifesting and stuff. And anyway, like, he's like, what? And I'm
He's
just like, well, this
probably
is how
like,
it,
what's
like,
going on?
I know. It's like, this is like, you know, this is how it exposes itself to the world, essentially. So he's like, so now, like, we're out for dinner, and I'm like, you know, well, he only eats pizza, pepperoni pizza. So, you know, surprise, surprise, we're out for dinner. What would you like to eat? Pizza. You know, or we'll be like, you know, okay, Daniel, you know, let's have a chat. But he's just like, no, I can't, Mammy. And he'd be like, Mammy, you know, does your head ever get like this? Or he'll come to me and he'll be just like, my head feels like this. Is that because of autism? Or, you know, he'll ask me very
Such good
specific
questions. Those are
questions.
good questions.
Like, oh, like, or he'd be just like, this is, you know, what's going on now. Like, what is this, Mammy? But he's no, because we talk about the brain, we talk about what's going on, our feelings and the sensations in our body.
Because
And I
he's
point
twice
out things to him.
exceptional as well, correct?
He is, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
So very
And
extremely intelligent.
yeah, he is. And like, but you know, he's young, but I think he spends too much time on iPads, and I just, like, you know, like, there is a fine line that he comes up from school and he's like, Mom, I just want to chill out. I just need to relax. And he's like, I just need to relax. But I know I also need to pull him back out of that and do other things. So
Because what
like,
is relaxing for him, out of curiosity, just for a young kid?
it's like being on the iPad. Like, so it's like, you
Oh,
know,
so that's
watching
relaxing.
YouTubers playing Minecraft. Like, that is, you know, that's his real, like, he loves Minecraft. He's obsessed. And, you know, and I think that's good. Like, I think Minecraft is a good, like, game for your brain. I have engaged with a psychologist online that does it through Minecraft. So we're in the queue waiting for an appointment, because I want to see what that would be like. Because I want him to be able to utilize what he enjoys, along with his with therapy in that kind of manner. Like, we did Lego therapy for years. He was obsessed with Lego and he loved that.
I love
you know,
Lego.
like, well, it's finding different ways. Oh yeah, that's awesome. You know, as a mother, you want to do anything to protect your children and to support them, because you know that, you know, and that was me and my husband together. When he was diagnosed, we were like, we want to help him to be the best that he can be in every way in the world. Like, you know, no pressure, Daniel. And so it's like, well, how can we support him in doing that, and what can we do? So, you know, it's constantly looking at the ways that we can help him be the best. But I think it's very open and honest sharing, Will. That's really the core to our connection, is like, just talking about what we're, and like, for me, I'm like, it's almost like enlightening for me, because I'm like, hey, yeah, you're right. That's right. You know, we were at Disney on Ice, and we spent half of the time in the sensory room because it was just too much. And I was like, you're dead right. You're dead right. Even though he had like the headphones, and he's like, no, it's just too much for me, Mommy.
Yeah.
You know, he could say that. He could just say, it's too much for me. And it's
sorry,
not,
what does he?
Sorry,
what does he call you, Nanny? Is that like
Mammy?
Mammy. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Okay.
He's like this, like, little Irish Aussie hybrid kid. Like, so he's got like kind of an American accent, kind of Irish, kind of Australian. Like, he's got he's absolutely gorgeous. And
awesome.
mammy is the Irish word for like mum.
Okay,
whatever.
yeah. No, that's interesting. No, that's such an interesting way of approaching it. But let's say and like you were talking about before, there are some parents out there who, maybe they don't have the experience you've got, or it is very foreign to them. They're just learning about it. It's probably quite daunting for some parents as well, entering into the unknown. So what would be some advice you'd give to other parents on similar journeys to what you've experienced?
I would say embrace it. Like, I just think like it's a beautiful thing to be different. I've always like lived, some of my old work colleagues used to call me a maverick. And they're like, the maverick. And I'm like, no, it just makes sense. You're always like doing things differently. You're always kind of like pushing on the boundaries, like trying to, test the rules and stuff. And it all makes sense, right? Your kids are probably going to do the same. Now, that you could allow that to drive you crazy, or you could embrace it and like support them in a soft and gentle way, right? So like, it's like, not like, no screaming. We don't shout in our house. There's no fights. There's no, like, we're all very, very chill, very calm. It's all like, but I've worked very hard to create that, like, that regulated nervous system. We don't let it. No, I only have one child after all. I know some families have multiple children, and I take my hat off to you, because like one is enough for me, with a full-time job and running my own business, like doing so many different things. But also that's my, our family's personal choice. And it's trying to be able to support them where they're at, not trying to make them what you think they should be. And I think that can be a problem that a lot of people experience in the past. Oh no, don't do that, or and I catch myself saying, like, don't do that, do things the way. And then I'm like, shh, shut up, Ash. Let him be. Let him be, like, crazy and kooky, and let him experience a way where he feels confident and comfortable. Because I think quite often, like, where the fights and the tantrums and the craziness happens with kids, and of course, like, all kids are different. We're all different, but like all neurodivergent representations are different, and it's dependent on what support you've had, and what level you're at within your diagnosis, and how, and your family dynamic, and everything else. So for us, we keep a very calm and happy and kind and soothing kind of household. And like, there's no like drama. Like, the other night my husband gave him pie. Like, he made a meat pie, and he gave him meat pie and mashed potatoes, and I was like, what? And like, poor Daniel sat down, and he's like the tears are welling up in his eyes.
Oh, he doesn't like pie and mashed potatoes.
No, he eats.
I love that. I love
chicken.
that.
He eats pizza and chicken nuggets. Well, like, that is it. That's all he's eating.
Really? Wow. What about vegetables?
No vegetables. And I don't, because I didn't eat vegetables either. But now I do. And I'm like, pick your battles. I might have people reporting me for being a bad mother. Now they're like, oh,
don't worry about them.
But I'm
those
like,
aren't our listeners. Those aren't our listeners, by the way.
I always recommend to pick your battles. Like, do you need to fight over them eating the broccoli, or is it better to help? So like, he wouldn't eat the pie, and he was crying, and he was like, we were like, at least if you try. And then I ended up putting him on chicken nuggets, and he loved them. He loved, thank you so much, Mommy. I love you so much. He was so grateful. I guess sometimes it's good to test him to see, like, would you have, last night we had a different dinner, and I gave him some of mine. He loved it. And I'm like, great, like, so there are different things that he loves. We do try and give him as much of like a rounded diet as possible. And he eats fruit and stuff, but like, no veg. But I didn't eat veg. And I'm healthy and fit and capable. And, so that, like, these are the things, Will, like, you need to pick your battles. with children, and you just need to support them. Like the fights and the tantrums will come when you're fighting against each other. So get into flow with your kid. Like something that I learned early on when I was studying NLP was pattern interrupting. And I found that was super helpful for me when he was like 3, 4, 5, like those like dynamic kind of toddler tantrum eras, like, and like he used to throw himself against the wall, like he'd be, like it was dangerous, but I was able to utilize the skills that I learned to support him. And quite often it was pattern interrupting, and also diversion to something else, like, so that he wouldn't hurt himself, and then trying to understand the triggers. And if you can understand like the triggers that your children are experiencing, well, then you can support them even better. Is it in school? Like, what are the things that are setting you off in school? Now, he doesn't want to talk to me about school. He just wants to relax. But when we create that like really open environment for conversations, he will.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Definitely some awesome stuff you've shared with us. But I think we're pretty much close to the end now. Awesome chat, by the way. It's been great. You're straight out of the blocks to start with, but we'll manage to able to bring you back. So that was good. But you know what? You were telling me before we started, you've got some really cool stuff happening. What is it that's going on, and where can people connect with you?
Well, a couple of things that you'd have seen on my social media. I am training for the Melbourne Marathon at the moment, actually. So I'm hoping to do that for a neurodivergent charity. So I'm in touch with the Melbourne Marathon and with some charities to see if I can support them, and because I found that running was one of the best things for me to help me to regulate, to manage my dopamine, to support my mental health, and really, like, I'm just so grateful for running. And so that's one thing that I've got going on. But the other thing, I run a group coaching course twice a year in February and in August. So for late diagnosed women. And it's called Neurodiversity in Me. And it's about exploring your new diagnosis, because again, I know what it's like. I've been there, and I know that it can be difficult. So I go through everything. It's 8 weeks, and it's a weekly 90 minutes a week on a Tuesday evening. And we go through everything to do with neurodiversity, just understanding it, getting to grips with it, because it can be very foreign. And you have to do. So what I went a lot of places, did a lot of research when I found out. So I've kind of put everything together.
Compiled it, so they don't need to do it, right?
No, so they don't need to do it. And then you're part of a community of people who are experiencing the same thing as you. And like you said, well, it's really nice to hang out with people with neurodivergent mates, right? Totally. It's really nice to hang out with neurodivergent mates. So that's important. And meeting people to know that you're not like you're not alone in this. Like, there's so many people. And
did you say that it's almost sold out as well? So you better get in quick.
Yes, I don't like the group to be too big, so I like to keep it very intimate, because it's personal. We're sharing a lot of like really personal things, and there's emotions and there's support, but we get through it, and it's really beautiful.
That's awesome.
So it's 8 weeks. It's starting the first week in August. Is that far away? And yeah, so if any of you, I'll put a link into the show notes, and if you're watching online, I have a QR code on my screen that you can scan. That's the thing. And you can check it out there. You can book in a call, and I can tell you more about it.
And I think as well, people could probably connect with you on, you've got like Instagram accounts, correct? You've got LinkedIn. What else do you have?
LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm on them all. I'm not really good on TikTok, but I'm on Facebook. And yeah, that's probably you'll find me in one of those places. Yeah, but I'll put a link into the show notes so that you can check it.
Yeah, no,
I'm so grateful for you to have me today. So,
I'm just sorry Photon John wasn't here, because he would have loved to have chatted with you, because you know, he's there's probably a lot of similarities that he's growing up with. He doesn't have any children, but you know, I think he would have related to a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. But thank you so much for coming on. We've done it. We've been trying to get you on for ages, correct?
Yeah, a couple of months, Will. So I'm so grateful to be here. Time passes, doesn't it?
What's that? Oh, it does.
Time passes.
Well, the hardest thing for us is that we do get a lot of people reaching out to come on. So it's about trying to fit everyone in, and we do it every fortnight. So it's not like it's a weekly thing. So sometimes we might book people in and they may have to wait 2 months or more, you know, and then sometimes people's plans change. So things open up, and that's where it's like, hey, Ash, I've got to get you one. You know what I mean? So it was good that we're able to get you.
If John ever wants to have a chat with me, I'm happy to come on again and fill an empty space on another day.
Totally. But look, thank you so much. And for anyone who's listening, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, like, and follow to all of our social media platforms. My name's Will Wheeler, and this is Neurodivergent Mates. Till next time.